consider is electro and magnetic, and they're very closely related in various methods. The electro dies a heat death very shortly, and the magnetic flux field continues onward, and it's actually what makes possible radio waves and all kinds of energy applications that are not possible with electricity. So with that in mind, I've worked on about 200 or so different devices, and a large number of them actually show evidence which is contrary to what we're taught in physics. My experience with that was that when my son was quite young and university level, I had the opportunity to see his physics books, and I realized that something was badly amiss as far as energy was concerned. And with that in mind, for about 20 years I've been pursuing the subject and in great detail. And I'm like killing snakes, I tend to overdo things. So I've spent a great deal of time and very intense effort in learning about energy and various aspects of it. And regards to that, these devices which are going to be seen on the screen here, I think the first one is the 8-unit device, and that is in manufacture in Russia now. The Russians sent over a group of technicians to Houston, and we spent about 6 months working out the details on it, and it was replicated in about four times the size of what you see in the photograph there. And it was highly successful, and it did everything that I said it would do. This type of device normally it has the enemy of heat. If the heat is involved in the process, it kills the magnet system off. So we had to have a device which did not have that heat killing aspect in order for the magnets to continue on for long periods of time. In this system, the way it's constructed, the magnets will last basically forever from a human standpoint, without needing to be replenished. But what most people are not aware of is the fact that these magnets have hundreds of Gauss in them, and a Gauss is an energy equivalent of about 100,000 watts of electricity. And that's on the basis of a temporary exposure. When the system rotates, it has a shielding thing inside it which breaks the magnetic contact in part. And by constructing it the way I do, it doesn't kill off the magnetic system. And the Russians have been particularly successful in developing this device. And the Russian Academy of Science and a whole slew of other people in Russia followed me very closely, and we're in contact almost on a daily basis. And they have a number of other devices which I have. They've actually patented some of them through the European Patent Office, and so I have a number of real important landmark patents which have come down the line courtesy of the Russian Academy of Science. And I didn't have to pay for it. They supplied the funds and everything, and took care of it automatically from my descriptions, and which I supplied them. And they consider that it's the way to go. And we're going to see something which is very simple later on is the piece de resistance. After we get through with this talk, near the end of it, there's two things coming up. There's on the electron pairing. There's someone here who has developed and copied and has a design patent on this electron pairing sequence, which is very clever and helps illustrate the nature of electrons. And we'll have him come up and demonstrate that for us before we go into the final part of the show. And at this point, if we go on to the next device, and I'm going to have to be able to partially turn in order to be able to discuss this with you. We can continue with the photographs. Let's see, we may have to stamp this on. Yeah, that's good. So we'll talk as we go. There's quite a few of them. As a matter of fact, there are 116 of these photographs that I wanted to show you earlier, and I was able to edit out to about 76, I think. So we're going to have quite a ride here. So hang on to your seat and let's go. And we'll take questions later, so if you have questions, make a note of it, and we'll have time for that. Okay. The object is so you can see this first device from several angles. And this is when I was developing a shielding device, I had to make it myself because what we have there is a sheet of plastic, and we take the cover off the paper cover off the sheet there, and we spray shielding material, powdered metal shielding material over the thing after spraying it with rubber cement. And I do several layers of that, and the part of it is going to be when you pull up the mass there, the center part, which you see right now with the paper on it, will disappear, and so will the shielding material, and there will be openings inside the mass there that allow for the magnetic flux to pass through it. Okay? You're seeing the same thing up closer, and there's going to be a point there where we can pull some of the shielding material off, and you'll see how it works. Okay, this is a different device. We'll skip over it for the time being, but that's 35 kilowatt device that we just saw, and it works like gangbusters. This is one of our early coil deals. I have one now which Bill Wysock has built for me out in California, which I go to visit him after I leave here, and I'll be there for July the 4th in Bill Wysock's presentation, annual presentation on July the 4th with the huge coils that he builds, and all the news media, everyone from all over the world will be present for that, and I get a front row seat. But he's building a very special Tesla coil for me, and it's actually 3-layer Tesla coil, and with one energy source running 3 coils. It's 40 inches in diameter, and the wire is much larger than your thumb here. It's a type of welding cable. It's multi-stranded. The reason for multi-stranded is that it causes the magnetic flux to multiply in such a way that is very beneficial. So this type of coil, the diameter of the coil divided by the diameter of the coil times the number of strands available is the multiplication factor in the coil set. So if you put 500,000 watts into it, the magnetic flux will end up being, say that it has 30 turns on it or something like that. We'll be having approximately 30 times the output in usable form, magnified to the 30th degree. So this is very early when I built to demonstrate that. This is about 20 years ago. And at that point, I knew that I was getting a lot more energy out than in. And it was very easy to see and prove. So this energy has to come from somewhere, since it's not neither created or destroyed. It simply changes form. So this energy has to come from somewhere. So the only possible place it can come from is the ambient background, which is actually, you see it when the Earth rotates or turns. It's like an electric motor. Something has to cause it to spin. So you take the weight of the Earth and the rotation, rate of rotation, and you can calculate the energy, ambient energy present in the Earth's electrical system. And this is true of all the celestial bodies, what makes them rotate, and the degree to which the energy is present in order for that celestial body to be rotating. And this is all, it gets back into the electron thing. The electrons are the cause of it all, and we'll have something on that a little bit later. Okay, we can continue on. Okay, this is a diode bridge that goes with the flat coil we just saw. And it was built, since the frequency at which this thing is running is down within the easy range of what diodes can do, that sort of thing, you can actually extract the energy very easy and see the multiplication factor. Okay, next. And these are just different views of the same thing for your you can see it's not very many turns, but it was very effective. Okay, this is something else. We had a group of people that were able to take, my mind's going sideways, just a second, please. When you have electrical, when you have pressure on devices and they generate electricity, that's what this is all about, because it's a device which, unknown to most people, if you have okay, we're stamping on somewhere.
Well, I would.
That's good. That'll take care of it.
0 point
Okay. Anyhow, this is a pressure-sensitive type device, which, when you put pressure on it, it generates an electrical field. And with that in mind, most people don't realize that electrical current or current coming into something like this is the same pressure type deal. So you're generating electricity with a piece of solid state device. And the project, if you follow the put it together, and there it is, complete. So the idea was I put energy into the center part there, and it was producing energy out on each side there, a great deal more than what was put in. For example, if 5 volts was put in, it might have 10,000 volts out, that sort of thing. So you got two sides there, and times 10,000, that's 20,000 volts coming out of that thing. And what really happens there is that volts and amps, of course, are very different things. But amps only occur when you have a grounding. So in order to turn this into useful energy, it's the way in which you ground it will determine whether it becomes a practical source of useful energy. But it turned out very successful and a very high rate of amplification. And we'll look at some more of the parts when I was putting it together. Okay, this is a diode bridge which I designed myself for my plasma tube experiments. In plasma, if you have a way to measure magnetic flux, which there's a number of ways, plasma tubes put out such huge amounts of energy you can't believe. So you put maybe 20 volts in or 10 volts in or whatever, and out of the plasma tube, it's eliminate the energy coming out is maybe 50,000 or more units of energy that's going in. So a great deal more than that actual. So if you have a way to capture the energy from the plasma tube in a practical way, and you work it down in the frequency zone where the diodes work for you instead of against you, you can get a lot of useful energy directly from the plasma tubes. Go ahead. This is sort of a stranger got in between. It's one of the 200 or so devices that I told you about. Oh, go ahead. Okay, this is inside of one of the more sophisticated zones, and that thing in the center there with the coils on it was intended to correct the frequency so that you could control it properly. And it turned out that I had calculated everything such that it didn't need that part of the device. So go ahead. Okay, this is where the energy passes through one side of it there, and the magnetic flux feeds on the secondary coil there, which is the feedback coil, which means that the device, once it's started, it can run on its own and generate electricity basically forever. Okay. There's some more views. Go ahead. And more views. And that's the details on some of the capacitors and things that are there. Go ahead. Okay, this is a device which you'll recognize for measuring DC current, flux, DC flux, and it's something you use in combination with several other instruments. Go ahead. Okay, this is a high voltage, a high frequency device for measuring energy. Go ahead. This is one of my early devices with the shielding material on it, which keeps the flux inside the box. It's aluminum. Okay, this is one of the plasma tube devices with the got the bridge thing intact there. And back up, Mark. Okay, see that pyramid there? The people in Egypt there and their pyramids back several thousand years before Christ had energy devices, and what you're seeing there is a photograph of the energy flux in the area of the pyramid, and it's enormous. And the triangular shape is what contributes to that. And the base material there would be one type of mineral which had electrical characteristics, say, of one type, and then the pyramid itself is made of another kind of material which has a different electrical component. And between the sand which is sitting on and the pyramid material, which is a different material, and the triangular shape of it gives us this energy flux. And mountains do this all the time. If you're in the mountainous area, you can see the electrical display coming out from the mountains. So the triangular type system relates to the energy which you see in mountain chains and such. In Central and South America, you can see that quite good at night. It lights up as a type of lighting which comes from nature. Okay, Von Däniken built some of the electric light bulbs that were shown in the pyramids, and they worked. It's documented in all of your information sources, but he actually shows photographs of electric light bulbs which he's duplicated, which look exactly like the ones the Egyptians were building 3,000 years ago. So electricity has been around in useful form for quite a while, and we just didn't understand it, and we're getting to the point where we're beginning to understand it. When you leave here today, you'll have a much better view of what's out there, because you're not getting something for nothing, and you're not creating anything. You're just simply changing it from one form to another, and in that change process from one form to another, you have useful energy. If the energy is static and not moving, or is mass, or other forms of energy, you don't really see anything useful. It's only when it's going from one form to another that it becomes useful. And you capture it just like the water running down from the mountain to the back to sea level. In between, you put a paddle wheel there, and you've captured the energy. And this is true of all forms of energy, whether it's electrical or whatever. Okay. This is one of many, this is 14-inch Tesla coil which I built and engineered. And unfortunately, when I got it built, if you know how to place the coils, Tesla coils have a lot of useful energy. And in this particular case, it was totally engineered from a computer before I did it. And what increases the energy available there would be the diameter of the coil, the amount of turns on the coil, and a number of other things which will tell you what your amps and volts and things are going to be. This thing came out, when I finished it, I got a surprise because the computer program is very wrong. But it was very wrong in a way which meant that I would never be able to use the coil, because there was so much amps that the thing would burn up like a flashbulb. So I calculated everything and checked it before I turned it on, and I found out that I'd built a device which would be like a flash bulb if I turned it on. So I actually never got to use it. A big disappointment. Okay, we can go ahead. Okay, this is one side of the pancake coil again. Some of these are out of sequence, so we just skip by them as we go. This is a set of light bulbs which had 10 100-watt bulbs in it, which I demonstrated at the Tesla convention back in, I think it was 79 or somewhere along through there. And it caused quite a stir because they had the thing turned on. It was running at full force for a better part of several hours, and based on the amount of energy there, it would have only lasted a few minutes if it was not something unusual. And it caused quite a flap, and to this day there are people that still talk about it. Okay. This is one of the couple hundred devices I've done. And this one on the blue part down there is where you plug into it, and the output is over on the output. The input is over here. See, it's 12 volts. And here's the output. It's 120 volts at however many amps you want. It was good for about 4 or 5 kilowatts continuous from a 12-volt battery. So that must tell us something. And it's not something for nothing either. It actually happened. And someone bought this from me, by the way, and paid me good money for it. And they took it home with them. And you can see on it, you can see every part of it. There's no need to tear it up to find out why it works. But they did tear it up, and they got, when they couldn't put it back together and make it work, they got very upset with me. So I told them that if they would give it back to me the way they received it, I'd be more than happy to give them their money back. To this day, I've never heard from them. So that was quite some time ago. Okay, we can go ahead. Okay, these are, you notice 500 microfarad coil there, and another coil set. Those are just some of the things that I work with at different times. Okay. This is a capacitor set. This is 35 kilowatt device we're looking at here. And you'll see it from several angles. Go ahead. Okay, this is a 50 kilowatt capacitor. And I have this same size, this shoebox size, by the way. I have these from several manufacturers, and they go up to about over 400 farad. 1 farad is equal to a kilowatt. So that's each farad is equal to 1,000 watts of energy continuous. So the airplanes and the other things that I'm involved with use this type of thing in order to run electric airplanes and various other devices, and very, very successful with it.
How many volts is that? How many volts is it rated at?
I can't quite hear you, Dan.
Just questions at the end, you said. I don't know wait.
I think it would be best if we wait till later for the questions, and everyone will get a chance to barbecue me here.
That's not right.
So we won't. We'll make sure that part of the thing is there. So I have trouble hearing you, and conversation and exchange at this point would be a little bit difficult for me. Okay, go ahead. Very special device you're being introduced to here, which takes in, see the metal rod in the center there. You can't see the metal rod, it's inside the plastic. And we'll see some more photographs of it in a little bit. But this is where you use, it's from the submarines, where you have a resonant device, a resonant rod. In this case, it's terpenol D. And these things are $3,000 each, and I had about 4 of them that I was playing with at the time. And this is one of the devices I built with it. And basically what it does, those are capacitor plates in the center there, and a right angle component of electrical, the magnetic flux is useful energy. So those rods are set at right angles to the magnetic flux put out by the terpenol D rod. And this is about at the frequency it's working at and everything. We can use smaller cables, which might surprise you that the energy present there is about 50 kilowatts. And your input is maybe about 20 or 30 milliamps with 50 kilowatt output. And that should get somebody's attention. And the device does not exist. I have a patenting thing in process, and I worked through the European Patent Office and the Russian Patent Office, and one in China and several other places, and avoid the United States religiously because I spent millions of my own dollars trying to work with the Department of Energy and the other people, only to be severely disappointed. And it took me, I guess that was pretty dense because it took me about 15 years to figure out what was going on. And once I realized what the government was doing to me to stop me, I decided I'd go somewhere else. And that's when I started my website. Is over in more than 2,000 web servers worldwide in every language available, and I get daily emails from the ends of the earth in many languages, and I'm able to work this because of the fact that we have translation software and things like that, and so I have a direct contact with so many people you can't believe. I found out that in Eastern Europe, those people are about the most open-minded people I ran into. They're not brainwashed like the people here in the United States when it comes to physics.
Amen.
Yeah. And there were several other areas where I found out the Chinese are not brainwashed in regards to physics. So I like an audience like that because I like to talk to people who have an open mind. And they apparently realize the same thing because I'm told by the Chinese government that they consider me a national treasure. And I've had the same thing happen with Japan and Saudi Arabia and several other areas. Okay, next. These are more views of that same device, which doesn't exist worldwide. It doesn't exist anywhere because I do my own patent searches, and I do worldwide patent search in all major languages. And before I even do the first device. And this one does not exist anywhere except where I sit, so to speak. So it's a new technique, and it's a new system completely, and it works magnificently. and it appears to violate a lot of laws of physics. But it was based on the fact that terminal D was what the submarines use when they make their sonic signals that go 50 miles out and come 50 miles back. And sound is a form of electrical energy, magnetic energy, and just like radio signals and a lot of other things. It's just a different wavelength. Okay. These are simply, if you notice the devices here that tell you that there's magnetic flux present. I use those, and I have very sophisticated instruments also, but I follow the magnetic flux, and anywhere there's a large amount of magnetic flux, I consider a source of usable energy. Okay. Okay, this is something you're going to see me use a little bit. When we get through the speech, we're going to demonstrate the ambient energy background and the amount of it out there where you can visibly see what I'm talking about when I say that all this energy is everywhere all the time and is available to you. It's a very simple process to collect it, and I'm going to show you how that happens. And that's coming along at the very end of the show. Go ahead. This is one of the 200 or so devices that I did. This has a very unusual transformer there in the center. Unlike coil type transformers, this is heavy sheets of copper, and it's special made in India for me. And it has a very high degree of energy output that wasn't present before. So there's 3 or 4 points in this device where energy is gained above and beyond what's put in it. And you can see that the input is 12 volts. This is a 12 volt battery there. And the output down here is like, there's different taps there. You can get 110, 220, and I think it's 440. You can get your choice of any of those, and you can get it continuously, basically forever, because there's a feedback system here, which you can't really see it here, but there's a feedback system that works with it, and this thing is self-perpetuating. Once it's going, it can feed itself and have output in addition to it. And this is about 12 years ago, I guess. So I've been having pretty good luck with this sort of thing for quite a while. Okay, go ahead. Also, notice this is one of those 50 farad capacitors there. In the present day, those capacitors have over 400 farad. And that's what makes possible the electric airplanes and other things which we're going to talk about after a little while. Go ahead. This is a closer up of the multi-taps on that special claw. This is at 120 volts more or less. It's the output measured while the thing is running and generating electricity. Go ahead. Okay, this is one of my plasma tube devices, which I specialize in. But you see the metal plate there, there's a copper plate and an aluminum plate looking at you. And and there's a copper plate underneath there that you don't see, and these points here are where the contact of the different plates are. The aluminum plate is this side, copper plate is the bottom side, separated by plastic sheet. This device here has a milliwatt input on it, and it has a 65,000 watt output, and it's at a frequency which your diode bridges work, and you can tap it directly. And again, the reason why this energy is because of the ambient background, which is everywhere, all places at all times, is part of the Earth's resonant background. And so you're not getting something for nothing. You're simply tapping into what's already there and using a catalyst in order to arrange that tapping sequence. Okay. There's some more views of the same thing. Closer up view. Okay, this was one of the first devices that I built, and the object of building the device was the fact that each one of those coils there, one of them is the output coil. The center one, see, this one here, hold on a moment. This one is the center one, and it's the output coil, and whatever energy you put into this thing shows up in however many other coils you might put around there. And these coils are independently separate from the other one. They're not electrically connected in any way. So it's magnetic flux which is controlling them. You can have thousands of these other coils, and each one of them will duplicate what's there from the other thing. So that tells you something about the fact that you can get from the same source of energy, the same amount of output, you can get thousands of copies of it. Because here we got getting 3 copies of the same thing, and if you notice real close here, there's little light emitting diodes on these, part of the tuning process here. So it's really easy to tune the thing so that the lights light up, and that tells you that that coil is active and producing the same energy that's coming from the other one, from the output. And that was about 20 years ago that we're looking at there, and it was one of the first device I built because I was told that you couldn't do it. And that's a mistake when somebody tells me you can't do something. And I'm going to find out whether you can or not. And more often than not, I'm right. So we'll go ahead from there. Okay, this is looking at a 35 kilowatt deal. You see this is a neon tube transformer here, and you see the heavy diodes here, and you see them coming together in the current source. So you've got the output here from the capacitors feeding the 2 output points. Okay. Here's another view of something we've seen before. This is a high voltage, high frequency testing device, one of them. Go ahead. Okay, this is a project which I did for the Japanese, and you notice the Coke machine over here? Well, what I did, once I demonstrated the thing for them, I served them cold drinks. So this is one of the devices. We'll see it up closer in a little bit, but this device was made for like 2 kW and continuous and self-generating. And well, there was the Coke machine again. But there's the large coil, which I never got to use. Okay, go ahead. Okay, there's the Coke machine, and I rented the Coke machine full of drinks, and had a large number of people there to see it demonstrated. And go ahead. These are some of my friends from Japan. The man on the right here is the head of the CEO of a large shipping company in Japan, the largest manufacturer of ships in the world. And the other people here, this fellow here, his family owned a large number of vending machines. In Japan, vending machines, everything that exists, including auto parts, fresh meat, fresh fish, vegetables, and everything else. When you're in the subway and you get out going home, on the way home, you pass this huge number of vending machines, which you can get your supper, whatever it's going to be, from the vending machine. So there are millions of them in Japan, and it's very important. And they were spending so much on electricity running their vending machines that they were upset. So they commissioned me to find a way to get rid of all the energy costs associated with the vending machines. And that's where that Coke machine came from. It was a device I did for them. Okay, go ahead. This is a very interesting device. The black thing here, it's it's the material that when you put electrical current on it, it generates a lot more electricity than is going into it. It's piezoelectric material. It's a cable. They put the cables under the street and under the highways so that they can do counting of autos that are passing by and that sort of thing, by the pressure-sensitive material. Go ahead. Okay, we're familiar with that, so we can go ahead. Okay, this is a closer look at one of the plasma globes which I used. Go ahead. And of course, another view of the transformer. And a lot of these views here will be just duplicates. Now this is a different device, which if you notice, it's a Tesla coil wound around a toroid. And the benefit of this is once you get the energy into the toroidal system and it's circulating, you can have however many, you can't see it very good, that there's a tap off of it. You can have as many taps off of that as you want, and each one of them duplicate what this Tesla coil is putting into the, here is a neon tube transformer running the Tesla coil, and here's the red thing is the L1 coil, and the L2 coil is the larger coil on the outside. So that was one of my inventions, is a Tesla coil that ran off of a large toroid. These toroids were from the Los Alamos laboratory. I had about altogether about 6 or 8 of them, I think, that I got as military surplus. But it's very special metal. It also has it's nickel with another mineral which I can't think of just now, but it has very interesting characteristics which are tend towards the over unity type results. Another view. That device was built for the market in Brazil. They approached me with redoing their entire infrastructure on energy, and we had had a deal with written contracts and everything with the Brazilian government and several of the senators there, and they were to raise $200 million to get this thing kicked off. And the problem was that when they got the money raised, the exchange rate was fluctuating in the wrong direction so fast that the amount of money that was left over from the exchange to the new level wiped out anything they had done. And so we raised $200 million about a half a dozen times, and every time the thing fell through, because when we tried to change it back to dollars, which I wouldn't. I had to have some dollars because I had to underwrite the thing myself and pay for all the costs and expenses, and they would pay me with their money, and that just wouldn't work when the exchange rate was so unfriendly. So that thing fell through. It's still very much there, and they keep coming back at me about once every year or so, trying to redo it again. That included redoing the set of electrical trains for going across the Pacific. They don't have a Pacific outlet for all the goods and things that are going from Brazil to the Pacific. They have a large contact with the people in China and Japan, and all the goods that they were sending them had to go around the Earth in order to get there. And so if they had a direct route through Brazil over the mountains, one of the projects was I was to do electrical train system for Brazil, and this is still very much alive, and it's still working if we ever get the details worked out. That's been going on now for more than 10 years. And they've seen my devices and are familiar with them and had their engineers working with me, and they know what I'm doing, and they're very pleased with what I do if they could just access the thing. Okay. This is a close-up of the Japanese energy device for the Coke machine, if you want to see what it looks like. Okay, the input part is over here. This is a milliwatt high voltage Tesla coil type device, and it's like I say, milliwatts, and it's coming through this diode bridge, and it's coming out into a capacitor here that has a certain level of energy in it. And from that, it goes into this system here, which you notice these are heat shields, and a very special type of diode here. And what this does, it makes the energy into pulsating DC, which in turn goes through this toroid here, which smooths it out and makes it into alternating current, which can run the Coke machine. And to the Coke machine, after that diode thing there, the coil toroid, it's almost a perfect sine wave, which means that the Coke machine doesn't know the difference. It's still pulsating DC. But the Coke machine seems to think it's alternating current, and it runs on it just fine. So here we are with milliwatts in, and we got about 2 kilowatts out, actually, continuous. Okay.
We're at the end.
We're at the end?
We're at the end.
Okay.
We pruned back so that we could actually have lunch.
Okay. Is there any one of these devices that anyone would like to see or know more about?
All of them.
All of them?
Take about 5 minutes so we can change the tape over.
I think
We're going to go on to another tape. So
We need a 5-minute break.
Use the microphone too.
Are we working?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're live, but no longer.
There's a phenomenon called electron pairing. I'm going to ask Aaron to come and demonstrate for you. The fellow that's going to do this is very much into physics, and I think it's it's one of the Eastern universities of high level, and he's going to. It's Dennis Lee, and he's going to bring his. This is a patented device demonstrating electron pairing. So, Dennis, please come forward, and you need more of this, I guess, for a moment. Let's see, I can't get it loose. So, Dennis is going to take over, and this is a little interesting system which demonstrates electron pairing and how it comes into the energy situation. Okay, Dennis.
One way of explaining where the energy comes from is the sun emits electron pairs, and they're everywhere. In subatomic theory, the electron shells, they always talk about the up and down electrons, or left-hand and right-hand spin electrons. Well, when they're in a pair, it's undetectable. But you can use weak magnetic fields to separate them. And this sort of demonstrates an electron pair and how they may combine together. And there is a unique mechanical property which keeps I call it concentric toroid, which keeps the small toroid centered in the large toroid. And you can see they can come out, you can use a weak magnetic field and separate the two, and this becomes positive electricity and negative electricity. And an interesting thing about this is that when you roll it on a tube, I don't know, this could be a flux line, and I don't know if you can see this, but it rolls and it spins. And that's a mathematically correct fourth dimensional rotation.
Okay, we can switch back to them. Dennis is much more sophisticated than you might suspect here. You're getting into the university level at MIT and that sort of thing. So he really knows what he's talking about. These electrons, like he says, in the ambient background, they're everywhere in all places at all time, throughout the universe complete. So you can't go anywhere without running into them. So if you have energy devices where you can turn this energy into propulsion or various other uses, like the in-between I was talking about, it's when the energy is moving from one happening to another happening, it becomes available. So with that in mind, I have some handouts here which will give everyone that wants them. There's two parts to that. There's the first sheet and the second sheet, and actually in the package there, the sheets are separated, so you have to just take the ones out, the first one there. This handout is related to the ambient background energy that's present in the Earth everywhere at all times. and make sure anyone that wants them can have a copy of those. And we recently had moved, and a lot of my stuff got misplaced, but I was able to make copies from the correspondence I had with various people at various times. What you're getting here is an email that I sent to someone, and I had to work that in order to get the thing. I couldn't locate the file without that person's name on it. So we can kind of slow for a minute here until we get going. And there's some more handouts related to some of the devices. When we talk about energy being everywhere in all places at all times, in the case of capacitors and what they do in regard to energy, this is part of the secret as to how we can utilize the energy to our benefit. For example, a capacitor is a blocking device. Energy cannot pass from one side of the plate to the other side of the plate. But the second side of the plate, due to van der Waals and Kashmir forces, duplicates what's on the first side of the plate, even though there's no way for that energy to get past the plate. This duplication is due to the ambient energy background. And with that in mind, the second capacitor plate, which is not part of the system, as I'm going to be showing it very shortly. If you have a diode bridge, for example, and you have the energy coming out of the diode bridge, you put the charge onto one of the poles of the capacitor. The second pole will duplicate what's on that first capacitor without having any reason, obvious reason to do that. And that is the ambient energy which is available through the capacitor, second capacitor deal. And if you ground that properly, it becomes useful energy almost immediately. So we're going to actually demonstrate a case here so you can see it working with your own eyes. So it's not very complicated. It's much simpler than anyone would ever have imagined. And the energy which you're using is the ambient energy background which spins the Earth around. And the handout which I gave you is telling you basically what's going on there. And in nature, all things are simple and uncomplicated if you truly understand them. And the energy source is available to you in unlimited amounts. With the device as presented, the energy available would be equal to the amount of the energy put into it, whether it's a million volts or 5 volts. So basically you design the output device so that it runs at the rate which you want to see at the collector point. So if you're running a scooter or you're running an airplane or whatever, you happen to be running an electric motor or automobile motor or steam ship or any other type of energy device, the amount of energy you want is the amount equal to the energy on the plate, the first plate there. So with that in mind, we have a device here to demonstrate that, and if you will set it up, we'll let you actually see it with your own eyes. These are two capacitor plates, and bring the high voltage device over where you can touch it to the copper side there. And what we're going to do, we're going to put, this is a dielectric tester device which is used for certifying the electrical durability of films and other kinds of things. So we're going to use it for a purpose which it was never intended to be used for. I'm going to put 8,000 volts on one side of the plate, and you're going to see the same 8,000 volts show up on the other side without any input to it. And with that in mind, the grounding that you do from that second plate depends on how much energy you want into the device that you're going to be running. Let me get hold of the device. Okay, I'm going to put it on the edge there.
Here's where I hope nothing was damaged in shipping.
Okay, is it turned on? Okay, we're going. It's turned on edge. Okay, and what I'm going to do is put 8,000 volts on this plate here. You see those sparks there? Okay, what we're going to do, we have a thing worked up with the earth ground only present on it, and the green wire is the earth ground, and what you should be seeing the sparks on the other side. Are you doing that? Yes. You see how loud those are and how warm they are? I'm about half an inch or maybe an inch here from
You're noticing the plate in the middle. There's no electrical connection. So the energy must be coming from the ambient background.
So there's no connection there between the energy on one side and the other side. So the second side has to be your ambient energy background, which is present everywhere at all times.
Are you putting alternating current 8,000 volts?
In this case, it's alternating current, but it turns into pulsating DC on the other side, which can easily be changed so that you can use it all as alternating current. See how long those sparks are? How many volts is that? A quarter of an inch is about 10,000 volts. So this thing is up to 1 inch separation here. So between the two plates, we're developing from the ambient background about 40,000 volts. It's a little bit hard to deny it.
Now there's so much voltage that the spark gap is such that you can almost get it with the wire at the top.
It's set for only about 10,000 volts, so it's greater than what somebody's reaching around me.
Yeah, if you saw my finger jerk, it's because I moved my hand too much to one side, and so I got close enough that the spark gap got me. But otherwise, yeah, there you can see it occasionally spark.
If you were grounded properly, it would toast you like a marshmallow. The amount of energy available for useful purposes is equal to the degree of grounding.
You got alternating current going in one side and pulsating DC on the other.
Yes, pulsating DC.
We got to come closer. Yeah, there you go.
Why is it not alternating on the other side?
The ambient background energy is more related to DC. But you're looking at the measures for flying an airplane basically forever with it. And it's been done. I've already done it, and it's been manufactured worldwide. I mean,
My wife won't let me fly airplanes anymore because I crashed one.
this is more than a powered scooter.
Like I say, you can test this center. You rock your finger too much to the side. I'm just thankful that for electricity.
He shouldn't get any talking about that. Yeah, well, he's only, from the edge here, he's only 3/8 of an inch away from it. And he gets
The
it back.
second place there is a forever source of energy. There's no energy expanded off this side.
Would it matter if you had copper on both sides?
No, it's just a slight electrical difference between aluminum and copper makes it more choice.
So if it was copper on both sides, it still works.
Sure.
Or aluminum on both sides. What's your dielectric? What's your dielectric? It's like lead band.
Dielectric is
Polycarbonate?
it's polycarbonate without the 30-second video there.
Make sure you don't step in water when you're doing that.
Building up on the and flow out. Otherwise, I'd be talking about finger and the wall that would be yeah, you could wire it down to the wood. Correct. Building up on this is probably the one worth of there's only 25 fingers up So yeah, then start the battery.
This is a forever source of energy. So we doesn't have to take on it. It's only as long as you get it.
That side is still taking some amps, some watts, right?
It's very nice to watch. It's nice to watch during the year, and the output where depending on the grounding you have will determine the amperage for the output.
Now, how do I ground it if I'm doing it on an airplane?
Well, the airplane air and earth grounding. In the case of air grounding, you have different degrees of air grounding. So that means that the airplane can fly. And it works very well. There was a contract for 24 or 20 engine aircraft for that about 2 years ago.
Power meter, size of
Those that are 24 have already been delivered and served. 48 more.
This is just a regular AC transformer. I got on a neon light. But I could use a neon transformer to run that.
Oh, sorry.
Pretty good show. So we know where
The sparks are slightly different color.
Would you like me to get a shot in here?
Much bigger systems than what he wanted to do.
How many milliwatts is this putting out? Did you say? How many milliwatts?
I'm going to go over this all again for everybody.
Good. Thank you. Looks like you have copper on one side and aluminum on the other.
I'm thinking about building another electric car. I want to
Well, how are you doing?
Right now we got
Some good footage. Hard to understand you with so many people talking.
Come closer.
It's hard to understand you with so many people talking.
I'm going to go over this thing a second time since people have been able to see it and explain it all over again.
Just to
Maybe reverse if they doesn't matter. Capture while they pass, the energy doesn't pass from one side to the other.
It's all right. That's what's
Well, now we'll have
And as it stands there today, how is it like that? Where I say it has to follow, if I have it,
Okay, thank you greatly, and I think at this point, let's see if I can get there.
If you have a question, rather than sitting down here, because we can't pick it up on the...
one at a time.
Come up here and talk to the microphone.
Come up where I can hear you, because I have a hearing problem. And if individually you come and stand with me here, I'll try to answer your questions. So let's kind of draw straws here and see who gets to ask the first question. Come now, I know there's a lot of questions.
Who gets the first one that walks up there gets to ask?
The first one comes that gets to ask the first question. Thank you very much for coming, and what would be your question?
Well, you had like 200 some odd devices that you made there. Where can I buy one?
Actually, these have all been for my own personal entertainment more than anything else. And I spent several million dollars of my own money playing with these things over a long period of time. And a surprising number of them have over Unity characteristics. We want to ask another question?
You haven't answered that. Where can I buy one?
I just told you that they're not really for sale. I've occasionally made the mistake of selling one of them, and the people that get them, you can see that it's out in the open. There's nothing concealed. It's very easy to understand, and there's no reason to destruct the device that, say, the person gets. And I've tried to selling a few, and I found out that what happened to this, the person got it and tried to tear it up and see why it worked. And they could see that without tearing it up. And the moment that happens, they want their money back. And I tell them that if that's the case, please put it back like it was, and I'll give you your money back.
Where can we get directions to build one?
Actually, you can figure it out yourself. I've actually told you basically what you need to know.
a long way from schematic.
Okay.
Well, you know, if I could interject real quick, I just want to interject real quick. It comes up all the time. Please tell us exactly how to do this, step by step and piece by piece. But there's a problem with that. My father is trying to partner with industry partners to construct devices like this. They don't like it when he comes and does these conventions. And they talk about, well, what are you going to say? How much are you going to give away? Because the reality is, if he stands up here and gives a workshop and says, now take coil A and insert it into slot B, those industry partners will disappear like mist. And people then say, well, where can I go to buy these things? Well, the reality is, most of the industry partners, in fact, all of them to this point, that have partnered with my father, and he developed something for them, and they take it in-house, they're not turning around and selling Donald Smith Technologies over Unity devices. A friend of mine, who is in fact a CEO of one of these companies, who actually develops filament technologies for light bulbs, once told me, you can't make me stab my company in the chest. I might have a 90-year light bulb. I'm going to sell you a 25-year light bulb until the market's saturated. Then I'll sell you a 30-year light bulb. Saturation can take 15 to 20 years. So the reality is, they take his device, they improve an existing process, and you might see a new whatever, widget X, come out that's 10% more efficient than it was a year ago. That may be based on things my father has done, but you will not see widget X that will power itself forever. So my father's trapped between two worlds. He needs industry partners to take his devices worldwide and to try to make an impact. By the same token, he'd like to just unleash this to everyone, to the world. So he comes and says as much as he can at these conventions, so that those of you who want to try to follow along with this and do this on your own can pick up from what he's talking about. But don't ever expect him to give you the whole 9 yards, because even if he wanted to, I wouldn't let him. Because the reality is we've had enough people come to the table at our house and try to steal his intellectual property. And I'm sick of that. And to be frank, after he had his heart attack and his stroke that left him half paralyzed, I offered to move him with my money if he wouldn't use his money to New Zealand, to the country. Stop doing this. It's too much of a headache. But he's still here and he's still presenting to you guys because he would like to see the world benefit from what he's doing and it not just become a closet technology that someone sits on.
Well,
There's my piece.
Okay, Dennis, let's take your question.
In device 9, you used an acrylic plastic sheet
Yes.
and a powdered metal shielding.
The powdered metals come in molding metal projects today. Most of the metal molds are made from powdered metal. And how they accomplish that, they have a cylinder which is under pressure and they heat it up, and when the pressure is a certain level, the particles all are dispersed like powder, and they cool it down in that state, so they end up with powdered metals in any quantity you want. And if you want to build a solid device, you take this powder, put it in a mold, and you center it. You bring it up to the point where the metal begins to, where it touches, begins to grab onto each other, and you have a solid device.
Oh, so
any shape.
Was this out of a spray can?
Out of a spray can?
Yeah, where did you get the powder? What is the name of the powder?
No, when you get the metal, it's already been made into powder. The companies, this large industry where they supply unlimited quantities of all kinds of metals, rare and unusual. And everything
What type of
else.
metal was that?
What kind was it? Well, just as they say, it's something that electricity doesn't, magnetic flux doesn't like.
That airplane capacitor at 400 farads, what voltage was that rated at?
What voltage for the capacitor rated at?
400.
It usually is 24 volts or something like that.
How did you reduce the output of the Tesla coil to be able to accommodate only 24 volts?
Well, actually, what we're seeing here is an extreme case of what happens when you do this. You can do it to all voltage levels. So a 24 volt output at say 200 amps or something is quite accessible, because the amps don't show up until you do the grounding thing. If it's a dead ground, you don't have anything left. If you ground it properly, you can bring the amount of amps and volts in that you want. You can custom make it.
In the plasma tube device, you said the copper and aluminum plates are in the frequency range of a diode bridge.
Well, the frequency range will be whatever the plasma tube itself is putting out, which is from, say, 20,000 volts. 20 to 40,000 volts, for example.
You mean hertz? You mean cycles?
The frequency will also be about 15 to 20,000 cycles per second.
Because your diodes are rated for about 25 kilohertz?
Well, they go into megahertz.
Power diodes.
But you don't have to, if you pick your battles so you can win them, you try to make the energy source at a level which is easily accessible to the off-the-shelf diodes.
Right. That the toroid is military surplus material. Is there a name for that?
The nickel material?
Yeah, the nickel something alloy.
It's a nickel iron alloy. And there's a name for it, but I can't think of it at the moment.
Okay, and the last question is on the Coke machine. You have a diode device that's on the output of the first set of capacitors. And could you specify a little bit more on what that is?
Say again, please.
Could you specify a little bit more of what that diode device on the output of the...
Well, any diode bridge type thing will set it up so that it'll work.
Oh, so it's pulsing DC and it goes into the toroid.
Yeah,
that smooths it out.
We're using a pulsing DC when it comes through the toroid there, and when it goes through the toroid, it smooths out the thing so that it comes out almost perfect sine wave, which is a very simplified version of an inverter. Inverters are hardly complex, but they don't have to be. They can be hardly simple. And that's what I've done. I've simplified the inverter so that it has very few pieces, and you can see the Coke machine is running beautifully, so it must work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We need someone else.
I just wanted to add a comment here to you, and that is that in your present model of getting this technology out, this assumes that it's business as usual on the planet. If you read about the peak oil issue, for example, that there may be not very much time, several years, 5 years.
It's a lot less than that. I'm an authority on oil worldwide. My background is a petroleum engineer.
Have you? So you must be following the peak oil issue.
I'm very familiar with it.
Okay, so
I know exactly what's going on, and it's a lot sooner than you think. It's about a year and a half from now.
I'm going to quote Tom Bearden. Most people know about Tom Bearden here, but I ran a briefing for the United States Senate, senator from our state here, a few years ago in Washington, and Tom Bearden was one of the people I had there. At that time, which was the year 2000, Tom made the comment that if we aren't making these devices, anybody knows Tom knows that he's kind of colloquial from Louisiana. He said, if we aren't making these little things like sausages out of a machine by the first quarter of 2004, we might as well go home and go fishing because it was too late. That was
very true,
and that was his assessment. 5 years ago about where we should be. And right now, we ain't making them.
We're there.
We're there, and we aren't making them like little sausages. So,
what's going to happen here? We're going to have when you disrupt the system for food and energy and that sort of thing, you basically turn the world back to the 1800s.
Yep.
And you've done it overnight. So what's going to happen? You're going to have hundreds of millions of people starving to death, killing each other for food and all types of things like that. And take my word for it. I know exactly what I'm talking about. We're about a year and a half from that happening.
That's what I've read too.
And I'm very much very knowledgeable on the subject, and if anybody wants to debate it, I can handle myself quite well. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I don't want to debate it for a minute, but what I do want to do is pose something for us to think about. Here we are talking together about the existence of abundance for all of humanity being a possibility. But we're living in a social climate of fear, power and control, domination, and violence.
Very true.
We, by changing the way we're thinking and helping each other to get to abundance for everyone, can change. How do we do that?
Unfortunately, human nature is constructed in such a way that it's going to be very difficult. And although I think what I'm doing is for the benefit of humanity in the long run, it's going to be very difficult to implement. But my connections to China and Russia are well on the way right now.
Okay.
So the real thing is already beginning to happen. And I'm considered a national treasure in China, and also the Russian, or the intellectual part of the Russian.
The academic side.
Well, that sounds good. Let's hope that there are people here who may be connected to the mainstream institutions will understand that the U.S. will become a backwater unless we approach this technology.
That's my plan. I intended for it to be deliberately because I tried so hard to give it to the energy department and the other people. I spent an enormous amount of money over a long period of time with the energy department thumbing their nose at me. And so I decided myself that the United States was going to become a third world country.
Okay, what a shame.
That was my comeuppance for the fact that they had snubbed me on the way.
Wow. Okay. I hope we can do better.
Well, he's here presenting.
Yeah. Thanks.
Just had a quick question. I noticed you have brochures, handouts for scooters and airplanes.
Okay.
Are those companies that you would allow us to buy them from?
Say again, please.
Are those companies that you would allow us to buy from? In other words, you apparently
I'm not the absolute source of it, so.
Well, you'd have to contact the company that we've dealt with and see if they would be willing to sell you what he sold them, which they almost certainly wouldn't. But
it fits in there.
Right. It's just
they're selling them.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're restricted to only selling the
where?
Like if it's a part for a plane, they can put it in their planes.
Right. Okay. So they're selling their planes to.
Let me tell you about the airplane, for example.
But it's not going to have, like I say, it's going to have an efficient. It is unlikely, but it's up to them whether they'll put his full device on the plane or not.
Got it.
Let me tell you how the airplane came about. In Illinois, there was an air show about a little over 2 years ago, and the device was presented there, and the Chinese government happened to be present. And they led a contract for 24 twin-engine commuter aircraft using that system on the spot. And so the Chinese government was the one that broke the ice on that. And they, believe it or not, General Electric here in the United States ended up being a contractor. And the first 24 of them out running now, and they fly basically forever without any visible source of energy. And they fly at several hundred miles an hour, and they're very effective. And 48 more of them were contracted for recently, so there'll be 24 and 48, there'll be that many of them before the year's over here, actually out physically running. So the chances are you may have actually seen one of them. You may have actually seen one of them and didn't know it. They don't make any noise, it's one thing, and basically they run forever without any current source of energy, which actually we know is the ambient energy background, which we were demonstrating on this system. Okay, we need someone else that's not 10 minutes. I don't believe that.
The question is about the demonstration we had previously with the two plates. Do you need the electrical arc to have the thing work, or you can just put the high voltage on one side?
Well, actually what we were seeing here is totally unnecessary, because if you, any energy source which you can put on a capacitor plate, which is not going anywhere, when it hits that capacitor plate, that's the end of the transit for that energy. But the other side duplicates through the van der Waals and Kashmir effect the first side, and the second side is an open circuit, totally independent from the first side. And you can, the degree of earth grounding you put on that second side depends on the amount of useful energy present. So you adjust that so that it matches your requirements.
Okay, and to have the circuit work, do they have to share the same ground from the input and the output, or they have to be totally separate?
They don't share. Now, you can have the amount of energy actually physically used is very tiny. It's in milliwatts or less. And you can put a feedback thing on there which will make up for the difference there, and it will basically go forever.
Yes.
Is that your question?
Yeah, well, I will experiment and I will find the answer just to make sure that
Okay, well, I tell you, it's so simple as to be ridiculous, and it's not complicated, and that's my kind of advice. I like things that are simple and easy.
Okay, and you don't have to go at 10,000 volts to make the thing
No,
work
you
on the first
can
plane?
work it on 10 volts, 5 volts, or whatever.
Okay, thanks.
It depends on if you have a capacitor to handle it, you have a huge amount, or if you have a small capacitor, it will work just the same. Okay, you're welcome. I think everybody's thinking.
So the question, to continue his discussion about the voltages necessary, you can buy these 1 farad capacitors for $4 or
quite
$5.
accessible today.
Pardon?
They're quite accessible.
They're quite accessible for $5 or $6 or whatever they are. They're about that big. They're about that thick.
Yes.
1 farad,
Yes.
but they're low voltages.
1 farad is equal to a kilowatt.
So, but they only take 4, 5, 6 volts or whatever else. But you can
That's
use that.
okay, but you can use you can, if your terminal output is going to be 5 volts, 10 volts, or whatever, you adjust it accordingly.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's how you run your motor scooter. If you want to build a motor scooter that does this, just look at the capacitor that's already in that motor scooter and figure out how to wire it slightly different, and you've got a motor scooter that will run forever. Aren't you glad you thought of that?
Like an hour of that wiring.
Oh, my goodness. It's too quiet.
This might be a good time to break for lunch.
I got one more question. If you don't mind, Don, tell us a little bit more about the material that you put on the road. You say you use it in some of your machines. Some sort of material that creates...
The one that knocks the magnetic flux out?
Yeah, and they put it on the road to count the cars, and you use it in some of your machines.
Oh, you're talking about the...
Is the electric material?
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
It's like a rubber or plastic or something like
yes,
that.
it's available off the shelf. It's commonly used for counting automobiles and things like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bruce, you want to ask a question?
Well, I know how your stuff works, and I've built some stuff. And
I think everyone has in their mind pretty clear what happens. You're still expecting something to be complicated or difficult. It's not.
Very simple. Jimmy, I don't know if you're still in contact with Jimmy, but he built one of your devices, sent me a video, and he's lighting up a light bulb with it.
Oh, you can light up however many light bulbs you want to light up, basically forever.
He threw it all together from spare parts, so he's having a problem with one of the components in there, and he just hasn't replaced it. But with a new component in there, it lasts forever.
Actually, you can build light bulbs that will light up forever. I have some of the original light bulbs that were built back in the 1989 or something, and they're absolutely as good as they were the day they were built, and some of them have been used ever since they were built originally. And they don't wear out. So building a light bulb that doesn't wear out is not a complicated thing at all.
All of Don's circuits are on my website. All you have to do is download it and actually get your hands dirty and build the circuits and make mistakes, and then eventually you'll have a working circuit. But you have to get your hands dirty. You know, Don's practically handed it to you on a plate. The schematics have been up there for a few years, and there have been some people who have duplicated that have contacted me, and it works. It just, you know,
Which website?
newenergy.org. Oh, actually, take that back. It's from my news group on Yahoo. It's New Energy.
New Energy?
From Yahoo groups, the discussion list, and it's in my archives under files.
New Energy, N-U-E-N?
Yeah.
You want the website?
Yeah.
I just happen to have the article with me. Yeah.
You have the article?
Several articles.
Of Don's?
Huh?
Of Don's?
Yeah. Of Don's, not necessarily Don's.
I can tell you this, that in Eastern Europe, there are probably 400 or 500 people who have duplicated my devices with real good results. And one of the most interesting ones was they wanted to know in making the coil, like the Tesla coil pills, they used stainless steel tubes on the Tesla coils when they wound them. And the net result was that the whole countryside for about 10 miles around lit up at night, and they couldn't turn the lights off. So that was one case I don't know. There were quite a few more. It seems that people in Eastern Europe bloc are more open-minded than they are anywhere else that I've seen. And I have a lot of communication with them, and I know they've duplicated. Most people don't tell me when they've duplicated something. It suddenly becomes a secret, and I'm not supposed to know about it. But occasionally I get someone that's very friendly and talkative, and they'll tell me what's going on. And so I know that my devices have been duplicated in many, many parts of the world already.
Don, on your very first device, your picture you showed us with the coil and the three coils around it, right? Those small coils would suggest a very high operating frequency.
Yes or no. You can run it at quite a number of frequencies. The frequency depends on how fast the thing is spinning, because it's got an off and on device there where the magnetic flux has been cut off and it's turned on, cut off, turned on. Each time the part of the whole passage there that is open, see, it blocks the magnetic flux normally. And there are holes that are cut in the thing, and when they pass the magnet, the magnetic flux comes back, and it causes an energy surge. So it's not like the Dennis Lee I'm talking about is not the one that's here visiting today. But the devices that Dennis Lee did came indirectly from me. But he refused to use the system which I asked for, and the net result, those devices are killed by the heat factor. When they run, the magnets will last a very short period of time, and that's why you won't find it demonstrating in the devices over a long period of time.
A question about the frequency. The input frequency you said was very high in the example you gave us. Is that critical? Is that matter?
Okay, the natural frequency of magnets, they have just like everything else, every substance, it has a natural frequency which is built into the system, so to speak. So the magnets themselves can be very low frequency or very high frequency, but they're more inclined to be high frequency. And it's more likely to be out of the range. It's like your megahertz. If you see the energy spectrum from the electrical display that is available, I'll have to tell you about it on the internet. But all things, all substances, materials that are solid or otherwise, or human or whatever, everything has its own natural frequency. And most of the frequencies we're running into on magnet type stuff are actually in the gigahertz or something along that line. And if you know what those frequencies are, you can actually make an energy device direct without having any moving parts, and I've done that. And it was very successful. And say you have a 50 my mind's going sideways, on the amount of magnetic energy out of the magnetic flux energy.
Gauss?
It is into the
Gauss?
Hundreds of Gauss. Okay, thank you very much. And one Gauss is equal to 100,000 volts worth of electricity. So you can see the magnet with 100 Gauss, and it represents a considerable amount of energy, and the magnet itself may be the size of a peanut. See? So if you can access that energy properly, correctly, you have the equivalent of that amount of energy accessible to you. And I've done it, and it works beautifully. And it doesn't deplete the magnet, because the magnet works like a sponge. When you take the energy out, it immediately rebuilds itself. So the energy is coming directly at you, and can come out with unlimited amounts without depleting the magnet. One of my inventions does this, and I think it's very interesting, because it means that instead of a little tiny flashlight battery or battery like in a hearing aid here, you can have 1 million watts of energy direct from the source without having other complications. That's one of those 200 devices that I built.
Have you patented that?
No, I haven't patented it yet, but I dare anybody else to do it.
No, I was hoping you would, so.
It is a very interesting source of energy, and it's highly obvious it's there, and it's what to do about it that matters. And if you know what to do about it, it's accessible to you. I think we have a point here where we need to go find out how bad those beans were burned.
So we're at the lunch break here. We'll be back here in an hour and a half for my presentation. And let's give Don a hand for giving us his presentation.
Room to take your medication.